We're doing well on time, so I'm going to, move us along to the next work group, and then I know we're going to have some good discussion at the end. So Barbara McFadden, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
You guys, all 300.
Good afternoon. I believe that the day is going to begin this session with some overview of yesterday.
Next slide, please, Chris.
Yep, Barbara, we can't hear you that well. Is there a way you can get closer to your mic?
Oh, certainly. Can you hear me much better now?
Yes, a bit better. Yes.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so hi, my name is Jay Sackman, and along with Cece Andrews and Maggie Calkins, we were facilitating the leadership panel, leadership work group yesterday. And what I'm going to be talking about a bit is the takeaways from day one. I want to first say that our panel was made up of people who are in positions of power and influence. Really getting them to talk about, their recommendations really is meaningful. And we had a bunch of other people who joined on day two, who are professionals, providers, regulators, academics, and staff. And most importantly, Maurice, the nursing home resident, was a participant in our work group on day two. And I have to attribute that brilliant decision to Chris Laxton, who assigned Maurice to our work group, because it really was important to have him speaking truth to power and expressing his feelings as a nursing home resident. So a little bit about what the takeaways were from day one. So first of all, Robin Stone opened up by saying that structural racism in leadership in post-acute and long-term care is a microcosm of the rest of our society. And that sort of really, resonated with everybody, and it really kicked things off. And on top of that, there's unconscious bias and insensitivity of many leaders and managers. People don't feel listened to, and I've heard a lot of us in all three panels, people talking about disrespect, and I'll share an experience of my own. I've been in this field for over 50 years, and many of you have also been in this field for decades as well. And one of the roles that I played as an officer of a labor union in New York, I was in a break room with a group of workers who were talking about their experience and expressing their grievances. And one of them said to me, a CNA said to me, "We feel so disrespected." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And she said, "Nobody listens to us." There are many different examples of disrespect out there, but I always assumed that it was just that people felt that they were being spoken to disrespectfully. That was 20 years ago when she said that, and it really changed my whole way of thinking about it. So disrespect goes very, very deep when people don't feel that they're being listened to, particularly when they want to talk about the residents that they're taking care of, and their input is not taken into consideration in care plans. So the next thing that people talked about was the need to walk the walk as well as talk the talk. And what I think people meant by that was that leaders, like directors of nursing, administrators, or other people in leadership positions, should not just be preaching to other people who are managers, but also should model the type of leadership that they expect people to provide by engaging with staff as well as with residents. Leaders also need to affirm and acknowledge the staff's feelings about structural racism in our society. People are living this every single day and coming to work. And it's important for the sake of the relationship that leadership actually engage with their staff to find out how they're doing, how they're feeling, what they're experiencing in their community, and establish a relationship and let people express their feelings about what's going on in the community. We talked about 4 strategies for addressing this are internally within the nursing home, opportunities for education, sponsorship, and mentorship that's within the workplace, seeking partnerships with allies in education and philanthropy from outside so as to support further education and opportunities, interactive communication with staff, having real conversations. We talk about frequently the need to get to know residents. It's also important for leaders to get to know the people who are taking care of those residents. It's just as important as getting to know the residents themselves. And engagement with staff and activities to establish trust and relationship. And Hugo Pizarro from Arch Care gave us an example, cultural awareness opportunities where you have staff put together a multicultural cookbook to, and it breaks down barriers of communication when people are able to communicate at that level. So those are the takeaways from the day. And I'm feeling both a sense of urgency as well as a feeling of hopefulness about the future because of the work that we're doing. Now, I'll turn it over to Barbara McFadden, who has over 50 years of experience in this field as a CEO, as an administrator, and as a director of nursing. Barbara?
Good afternoon, everyone. Does everyone need a stretch like I do? Please take this opportunity to do so.
We're still having a little bit of trouble hearing you, Barbara.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right. Is it better now?
It's in and out. It's
Oh, I'm certainly sorry to hear that.
better. That's better, whatever you just did.
Certainly sorry to hear that. May I have the first slide, please? Thank you. Our group also used the word cloud to listen what words we thought would reflect challenges. So as you see from the cloud in front of you, many of these words have been used in the previous presentations. There are some that come to mind, these challenges come to mind and reflect for this group a deep dive and an intention or thread which we see throughout the whole process for this group. The words that I want to point out are communication. You've heard about communication from the previous groups. Distrust, diplomacy, listening, mentorship, opportunity, non-judgmental. Those things, those threads seem to continue to come through either in single words or in multiple words. Could you go to the next slide, please? Based on the challenges that were articulated, 3 distinct contributing factors or themes were finally articulated and formed based on dialogue.
Barbara?
Yes.
Barbara, this is Maggie. I was just going to throw in one quick comment. For those of you who were in the other work groups, we did our process slightly differently. And rather than taking the 12 or 15 challenges that we had identified and leaving them as independent challenges, what we did was to really work at finding the overlap between different challenges and bringing them into smaller and smaller number of buckets that had higher and higher level constructs. And so each of these identified sort of challenges actually reflect a lot of different factors underneath it that we had identified and sort of pulled together. And I just wanted to throw that in there.
Okay, certainly. Is there anyone else that'd like to add Maggie's comments so that we incorporate everything that's really meaningful and representative of the presentation? Okay, so if we look at motivating and incentivizing leadership and ownership, the very first theme, some items that come to mind in part of the discussion was how to differentiate between leadership and staff. We know that leadership can be manifested at various levels, but when we're looking at the administrative level, we would want us to think that both of those styles of leadership and opportunities for leadership exist. Those at the top part of the hierarchy, and those who are really demonstrating leadership skills where I say where it really matters, directly from staff to patients. CNA is so much doing this presentation, but we must remember that care of our residents and the function of the entire institution depends on various departments. So the environmental service person, the person who is in the dietary department, the one who is in stores, all of that leadership helps in two ways. One, not only in success of the institution, managing resources well, but if we do not have respect and allow people to have independent thought and have an ability to add to the job that they're doing and make it meaningful, we continue to keep this, what we've talked about so often, that plantation mentality and the devaluation of the employee. And it's not always in the in a course we could develop. It's also in the day-to-day discussion between those who work in the institution. We talked about board ownership, board ownership, motivation, and composition. We saw in our previous days, particularly in the first day, what boards look like and what ownership may look like. However, it means that at that level, ownership and boards really need to do some internal discussion about how are they meeting the ethos, philosophy of the institution, which look beautiful on paper, but when you were to actually speak those in the organization, none of what's on that paper exists. So that what we are asking, and we would hope that we would share across the board, is that evaluation of process, evaluation of your ethos, evaluation of philosophy statement, evaluation of your processes need to be an ongoing thing. And so it doesn't necessarily take an outside organization like ours, but it also means for those who are on the call that there's some things that they must look at internally. And it really can start with today as this session ends. The third box under that, general and self-awareness of racism. That's a very, very difficult thing. And it's something that I must credit to the newest member of our discussion group yesterday, Maurice, who is a resident. Having him in the room, for me, allowed me to remember, and I say allow me to remember, because we often forget, who are we really working for? Are we working for a concept? Or are we working really for the people that we care for? And so having that person, having Maurice in the room, allowed me to remember who I was working for and who really matters as it reflects to the things that we talk about. We also discuss something that Maurice made an excellent point. We don't want this to be a two-sentence conversation and call out the racism, because the answer, the call out of you are a racist institution, you're a racist individual, the answer is I'm not. So the conversation, again, which goes back on our very first slide about communication, needs to be entered into in a way in which common ground can be established so that we can go beyond the two-sentence conversation where absolutely nothing gets done. The second box, lack of access to leadership opportunities. The conversation seemed to focus on those who are not of European descent, whether of African descent, Latinx, Asian descent. How do we move up the ladder? Are there opportunities for us to move up the ladder? Are there opportunities outside of the organization for us to move up? to which we can make ourselves educated and qualified for. So composition of organizational leadership, oftentimes, and to belabor the point, it would look exactly like the slide we saw on the very first day. Very few, only one person of African descent. When we look at the leadership, leadership in an organization, and most of the others are different gender and different race. So if we look at lack of access to leadership, how does our leadership prioritize what they want the institution to look like? Lack of trust, again, another thread that seems to have gone through the two previous presentations. Lack of trust between the administrative staff, lack of trust between the administrative staff and the entry-level staff, or the staff at the bedside, the staff running the units, the staff running the department. That lack of trust generates barriers where there is no movement at all across lines, and the element of respect is certainly diminished. Empowering leadership of all levels. That's a tricky thing, because you have to be very careful and be very strong in your own ability to lead, confident in yourself, if you're going to allow the CNA, the environmental service person, the person who's washing the pots, to show some leadership. Is that going to reflect on me? Am I not doing my job? We didn't talk about that, but that seemed to have come up into my consciousness as we talked today. Leadership and empowering leadership at various levels, which we may tend to call entry level, has a lot to do with whether the leader, the person who is responsible for the entire operation, are you confident enough in your own personhood to allow others to show their gifts and talents to be able to lead? If we look again at resources, we must look at whether or not, and people have talked about it, are you using, how is leadership using resources? How are they allowing the people that they demand the highest amount of performance, the highest performance, but yet do not offer them or provide with them the supplies that they need? Oftentimes, resources are not provided to the staff at the rates they should be. We heard stories of, here's a mask, and that's the only one you're going to get for the entire shift. And we're dealing with something that is a breach of standard of practice when we talk about infection control, that these are disposable items and they should only be used once. When we look at resources, again, a sense at this level, if the organization has decided to integrate, as I call it, the C-suite, is the new candidate who may be a different gender and a different person, and a different gender and a different race or ethnic group, is the salary commensurate with the experience of that individual as the person who's vacated the job? Often not. The new salary for the enlightened institution of bringing now a person who does not represent the majority culture, it looks wonderful on paper, but the salary of the new person does not, in any salary and or benefit package, does it mirror exactly what someone of a different gender and race and ethnicity would have. So we look at resources, it's salaries, it's salaries, supplies, the way in which supplies are valued, so that each of the people who are in this organization understands that they are given the best. Oftentimes the quality, when I say value, oftentimes the quality of many of the institutions which with a lower reimbursement, the quality of the items used is not the same as perhaps in an organization that is higher, or when the resident changes from a different payer source, perhaps from a Medicare stay to a Medicaid stay, the resources available to those units are different, and that can go irrespective of race or ethnicity. It's all about the payment system. So when we look at recognitions of link between race and access to funding, there is little, several of the people, and I hope they're on the call today, talked about even the ability to go to funding sources or to print articles that are reflective of these disparities. Since has not been done before, they've had difficulty in publishing appropriate scholarly-based articles to demonstrate that there is a distinct difference between race and access to funding. So we must, in order to make some of the changes that we wish to make, we need to be able to have access to information and be able to print information to demonstrate where these disparities lie. I just want to digress and move away just a moment and ask any of the other panelists who are with us on the work group if they'd like to add anything to this slide before we move on.
No, I think you've done a great job with it.
Okay, now thank you. Now we've gone from challenges, prioritizing challenges, the contributing themes, and so let's go to the next slide. Here's where the rubber hits the road. What are we going to do after we've done all of this conversation? Are we going to walk away with a nice paper? Are we really going to move towards getting some action after all these beautiful days? I say we certainly are, and I'm excited about it. When we look at the area of motivating, incentivizing leadership and ownership, we know that this organization, with the plethora of excellent talent, will be able to scan and share available resources. We'll be able to convene work groups to identify effective strategies, then share them. After all, we came to be able to get the tools to do the work. This organization can seek grant funding to radically increase minority leadership. And minority leadership, it's very difficult, particularly in the Northeast where I'm located, has been taken over by a particular group. But let's face it, throughout the United States, there is a group. How are we going to integrate that group? Because certainly we know by statistics, we do know that there is definitely going to be an increase in the number of minority residents, people of non-European descent, and that group of people are going to be definitely diverse, diverse in culture, diverse in language, diverse in attitude. And so therefore, we need to be able to have people mirror our caregivers and our people who are in the executive suite mirror and understand the differences that exist. I remember right before I retired, we admitted a resident who came for a short-term stay, a much younger woman, and she therefore was in our rehab unit of a culture which did not allow her to be in the same presence as a man. So we had to make sure that all who came in contact with her, and remember, she's wearing sometimes a gown, occasionally she was dressed in and clothes and when to go to rehab. But we had to make sure that we respect her culture, her family's culture, and her and her needs for care. So we had to do a little bit of twisting, and it meant that we had to be in tune with some of the irregularities. I also remember someone from a different religion um, who did not, on the Sabbath, even take a bath. And so could not give the bath, and they were not taking the bath. And of course, what did the care plan say? You take, this is your bath day. So we know that the diversity of residents that we will see going forward in the future, someone needs to be on staff, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the director of nursing or relegated to the social worker. If we educate our entire staff, then everyone understands what must be done. So we do need the grant funding to be able to educate not only individual institutions, but to educate the entire population as much as we can of those of us who are involved in post-acute and long-term care. Lack of access to leadership opportunities. We can, this organization, when I say we can, locate and share CE content. That's something that can be done, and it can be done either through students who are at grad level, master's, doctoral level, to put resources available so that the practitioners, those in the field, can be able to use it. We can develop a directory for mentorship and internship opportunities. We have to coax some of our practitioners to open their doors and make it available so that mentorships and internships opportunities can occur across the board. Certainly, we can use historical organizations to do that, but historical today, when we talk about race and ethnicity, is not necessarily just those of African descent. And I just want to digress a bit. I remember having a resident who was male from Haiti. And in my American sense, thought, well, if I assign a male CNA to him, who also spoke both French and Creole, would be great. That was, it was like adding a match to a tinderbox. Why? Because within that community, within the culture of this gentleman from Haiti, he resented and did not readily accept this person taking care of him because he tended to be not to be submissive. And so where he came from in the culture in which was part of the group that he belonged to in Haiti, he was a servant. He was to remain as a servant. He was not to be on the same first name basis as he. He was to speak to him and work with him as a subordinate. And of course, that seemed so counter culture to the rest of us, and particularly me. I couldn't understand it. However, I learned the lesson. And so therefore, cultural nuances must be learned. Now, how can we do that? We can do that by partnering with schools of nursing, schools of social work, schools who have masters in healthcare administration. We can share this, and we can share it through our conferences by having workshops so that the information will be taken back by those who are present back to the institution. And it's an old teaching tool. Teach one and each one can teach many. We're not only talking about those in the institution on a daily basis, but this organization can tie with AMDA and the ABIM Foundation and Building Trust Initiative. it's something that we certainly can be involved with and help not only our physicians, but let's face it, our physicians often need to have a heads up. They often need to have a conversation to say that, all right, we know that your time with our residents is going to be short. However, it should be attentive, listen, be able to take that time and listen so that whatever care is needed certainly can be and can be done, but also we'll have buy-in on the end of the patient. As far as resources are concerned, if we look at the resources, we can scan and share existing resources and share with others. And as I said before, check with connect with universities. But the bottom box is the best. We need to seek grant funding to radically impact minority resident outcomes. And what does that all mean? It's a plethora of things that it addresses. Number one, if there is a high concentration of Medicaid residents who also are of non-European descent, because that means they could be of African descent or Asian descent, the care is not the same, the expected outcome are not the same. I would not want to use the word poor, but I would say it's less optimal. So it's important that we focus in and look at the fact that we must look at the impact of the negative effect of having Medicaid payment and high minority population. And now I'd like to turn this over to any of the people who are on our panel to add what I may have forgotten in the attempt to try to get all of this information succinctly to you and in an understandable way. I know you are out there. Anything that you'd like to add? Maggie, anything you'd like to add? Hugo, would you like to add anything? Cool.
I think one of the themes that went through a lot of our discussion was that a major part of the problem is the lack of awareness of the many ways in which people in leadership positions are unconsciously racist. They don't mean to be, and certainly if you called them out on it, they would have that 2-sentence response of, no, I'm not. But it's just so systemic that so many people aren't aware of it, that's a significant challenge that we think it would be great if Advancing Excellence could figure out how to help people with.
Well, I agree with you, Maggie. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I made a note to myself, there is a primer, I'm calling it a primer, and a must read. It's a new publication by Isabel Wilkerson. It's called Caste, the origin of discontent. So if anyone can have a chance to pick that up, it's an eye opener. I thought I've read everything I could possibly have read over the years, but Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, The Origin of Our Discontent, something that they suggested that we read as we formed our committee for the American College a program as in New York, for the American College New York chapter, for us to bond and to get to know each other as we work on an initiative in New York. So
And
that has helped.
we have an attendee who has a question.
This question is for Barbara, and yeah. So let's say, for instance, have you seen over the past years that you've worked as an administrator, as a CEO, have any of these facility created like an unconscious bias training for upper management and also for lower level staff, just a training with the unconscious bias in the workplace?
The answer succinctly is no. We've talked about cultural confidence, but we've talked about it in the boardroom, talked about it at manager meeting, but it amounted to naught.
So why are they not focusing on these areas?
The running of the institution on a daily basis seemed to override anything that was considered addition. Unfortunately, in many institutions, and my personal and this is I'm speaking anecdotally, over these years, I've seen less and less funds within the institution going towards any kind of education, or we would call in service. So and I would say that that's occurred when we went from direct pay from New York State. The payer system changed to a managed care environment. So you're dealing with your reimbursement and your payment system going from monthly to from weekly, knowing what your income would be, to a monthly basis. So change in payer sources changed a lot of what happened in an institution. So the institution saw itself more as a business. Work must be done at a certain level, and in services was one of the first things that was reduced.
Okay.
And then to your point, hi Barbara, this is Shanoy. Hi everyone, good afternoon. And to Barbara's point, we see a difference in terms of how for-profit organization versus not-for-profit and government-owned entities conduct training. From my experience as an administrator working for all three entities, I have seen more resources put into staff training and development where this is concerned, with the non-for-profit and the government-owned versus the for-profits that I've worked for. And sometimes, as to answer Regina's question, these things are not looked upon because maybe the upper echelons of management or ownership does not see it as a problem. So sometimes it's those unconscious areas that we have that are not being addressed, unconscious bias that we have, to the point where Barbara is saying, somebody may ask, you have those unconscious biases, and the person may respond, no, I don't. I have Black people, I have Asian people working for me, and so forth and so forth. So sometimes I don't think that all the time it's really intentional. I think that sometimes people are just not thinking about it. It's not at the forefront. Right now it's at the forefront because there has been widespread protests throughout our country which brought all of this to the forefront. So now we're paying attention.
Roy, you've just done a time check. You've got about another 2-3 minutes.
Well, if there are no other comments from the work group, I would consider that my presentation is concluded.
This is Jay. I just like to, I want to acknowledge Barbara, Hugo, Robin Stone, Shanoy, Diketo, as well as all of the other work group participants. And I just want to reinforce something that Barbara just said, that Shanoy chimed in on. We're in a scarcity mentality right now. Things were bad enough as they were. And for us to advance any of what we're talking about now, it's going to take tremendous effort to put it out in the forefront of everything that's going on. People are, having to deal now with vaccinations and staff shortages. And but at the same time, Black Lives Matter has made this a priority for our society. So perhaps this is the moment when we could really move this agenda forward.
Okay, as we look at our word cloud after going through a great deal of deliberation and processing, you can see.
We're not hearing you, Barbara.
We can see what you can see that went. Can everyone hear me now, please?
Yes.
After a great deal of deliberation and processing, this word cloud shows the continuing themes, and it resonated not only from the first slide, but to here: connections to resources, diversity of students, diversity equals quality. And that was what's poignant and so much up in our face is that where there is a high population of Medicaid patients or residents, there tends to be a lower quality of care. So if we take a look at those words are in front of us, I ask you to take them with you and to process them, see how you can affect change in your respective environment. Thank you again.
Barbara, thank you. And thanks to all of your team. Jay, thanks for naming everyone and your entire work group. This has been, again, a third very engaging conversation.